Ask most Singaporeans about trains in Singapore and they'll say...
MRT?
LRT?
Oh, the one that goes to Sentosa.
Ayah, Joyce, you should have rephrased the question. All those are what we call metro systems. We're talking about trains. Choo-choo trains. Choo-choo!
Huh?
Siao, Singapore so small, where got choo-choo train?
I think you can take a train from Woodlands checkpoint to JB.
Yup, this is the only choo-choo train you can take in Singapore today. And not for much longer too.
And this train doesn't even go anywhere else in Singapore, but comes here, to Malaysia. So, passport required.
But some of you might have remembered, up until about 13 years ago, this line used to run all the way south to Tanjong Pagar. We're now at what we know today as the Rail Corridor, a popular walking and cycling nature trail that runs along the remnants of the Tanjong Pagar KTM railway line.
Well, mostly.
There are many minor deviations from the real railway tracks on the pathway, but the most significant one would be right here. On satellite view, you can see that the rail corridor makes a little weird eastward turn here. But if you look more closely, there's another trail that seems to keep going underneath the MRT tracks between Kranji and UT across the Mandai River and then all the way to Woodlands checkpoint. This trail is a huge clue that there used to be a railway here. The sad thing is that the bridge across the river is gone, so there's no way to do a complete walkthrough along that northern trail today. And now something else is going to be built on top of it.
Although majority of the tracks have been lifted and sent back to Malaysia, you can still see some preserved/reconstructed railway tracks and infrastructure on the trail today.
Like this!
Or this bridge.
Or this, which is actually Bukit Timah Railway Station. The interesting thing about this station is that it was deliberately designed to look like small town stations, which look like the ones in Britain and Malaya.
And unlike this big Art Deco style one here at Tanjong Pagar, well, not this exact one, this is just a model because, as you can see, we can't really visit the real one right now. But this is because underneath this old train station, they're building a new train station.
But the funny thing is that for the majority of the railway's lifespan, Bukit Timah Station didn't serve any passengers at all. So, what happened?
To answer that, we need a rail history lesson.
Singapore had railways as early as the 1800s. We even had tramways like the ones London used to have. But they were all really short and short-lived. So in the late 1860s, plans were made to build a railway that would transport passenger and goods to and from Malaya. Thus, the Singapore-Kranji Railway was commissioned to be built by the Federated Malay States Railway, or FMSR, and it officially opened on New Year's Day 1903.
It was also known as the Singapore Government Railway, and it ran from the Singapore terminus at Fort Canning, aka Tank Road Station, through Newton and Bukit Timah, all the way up north to Woodlands, where there would be a ferry waiting to continue journeys to Malaya across the Straits of Johor.
But wait, this doesn't look like the Tanjong Pagar Railway that we've known for the last 90 years. Didn't the railway run across the causeway to Johor Bahru?
Hello, last time the causeway wasn't even built yet.
Okay, fair enough. But what about this whole southern bit? I don't remember the railway going through Newton.
Well, you're not wrong. Okay, so here's the thing.
The Singapore-Kranji route, particularly the southern bits, had quite a few problems like residents complaining about noise as well as flooding. So, the line was realigned in the 1920s, so it now ran from a brand new Tanjong Pagar station, past Tanglin and Alexandra, to a rebuilt Bukit Timah station, before connecting to the existing Bukit Panjang station. By this time, the causeway had already been completed, so new tracks were built that diverted away from the old Woodland station so that trains can now travel to and from Johor directly.
There's nothing left of the old alignment, so finding their remnants is almost impossible.
The most obvious clue that remains is this corridor underneath this bridge. Yes, the railway used to run like this, but this was more of an extension beyond Tank Road to the docks that were built later, so this doesn't really count.
And then this Bukit Panjang railway station. We kind of know the two alignments converged there, but the station was demolished long time ago. In fact, no one knows when it was demolished. So how do we even know where it was? Well, we can make a pretty good guess. It's around here. And this is nearby If you look at a map of the modern-day downtown line, at least the parts that was planned as the Bukit Timah line, you will notice that the route follows pretty closely to the older railway alignment. Coincidence?
And yes, it goes all the way till Newton. See? I told you.
But the old alignment had to go, and the new Tanjong Pagar Railway Station was opened in 1932. And for a long time, the line remained like this, untouched. Well, except for maybe during the war when it took some damage. And that one time the British blew up the causeway to prevent the Japanese from invading. Which didn't really work anyway.
But then, in 1965, things started to get complicated. Can you guess what happened?
Yes, it's when LKY cried on national television, and that presented an awkward situation.
The land that the railway was on was still owned by FMSR, which by the time had changed its name to KTM, which means this land still belonged to Malaysia.
This posed a load of complexities, including immigration, which means there had to be border control at Tanjong Pagar before even boarding the train, which means Bukit Timah Station can't be used anymore, reducing its function to merely a crossing loop station. Also, the Singapore government can't do any development on that land because there's a railway in the middle of it, and because that land is bloody Malaysia!
And so, to resolve this, a POA, Points of Agreement, was made in 1990 between the two countries, whereby both sides would swap pieces of their land so that KTM's land would all revert to Singapore and that KTM would vacate Tanjong Pagar Station.
But then, another conflict surfaced.
Hey, what are you still doing here?
Why? The POA only kicks in after we move out.
But the POA and the immigration are different issues.
There was actually a lot more to this, but basically, the two countries have different interpretations of the agreement.
Furthermore, Malaysia's then Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir was not so happy about some details of the agreement, and so the deadlock continued. You don't know who, that's why, because Singapore has not for another 20 years. Until 2010, when both countries finally, definitively, double confirm plus chop sumpah their final answers.
Tanjong Pagar and Bukit Timah stations would be permanently closed, and the last KTM train, driven by the Sultan of Johor, would leave Tanjong Pagar station on 30th June 2011.
The next day, all trains would terminate at Woodlands checkpoint, and most of the tracks between Woodlands and Tanjong Pagar were slowly dismantled until January 2012.
And that brings us to today, where the land where the railway once stood was largely untouched, except that it was touched up to become the rail corridor that we know and love today.
And for all the inconveniences that the railway land had caused, I think we can all be grateful that after getting the land back, we have chosen to preserve the trails, not just for the sake of history, but also the greenery that surrounds it.
But wait, that's only 3/4 of the story. Did you know that in the 60s, there was another line that branched out from here and went all the way down to the ports of Jurong?
Find out more in part 2! A huge thanks to our producer tier contributors on Indiegogo: Wei Heng, Agrio, Glenn Sim, Kopi C, Wilang Lee 87, Bai Jialong, and Sandy Angustian Pratama.